not Jeffrey.
Once again, that Jeffrey is not here. And lo and behold, he was back, came all the way to the studio, ready to go this week, except Jeffrey has a little problem. Mm-hmm. On occasion, he likes the sweets. Mm-hmm. Like that time he brought chocolate syrup, or the time he brought Skittles, or the time he brought Skittles, or the time he brought Twizzlers, or the other time he brought Skittles, or the time with the chocolate sauce, which is so bad I listed twice.
Didn't he once just bring sugar?
Jeffrey came to us today a little hyped up. I said, Jeffrey, what's going on? And apparently he started sugaring himself up before ever showing up here. So, Jeffrey has to have a timeout. We actually have him tied up right over there in the corner, duct tape on, and let's hope he stays that way. But we have a special show for you guys today.
It's an hour long.
It's an hour long because I said, you know what, if we're going to have a special show, we need more of me.
And me.
Right on. All right, last week we took a sidestep from our project while we were building some other tools that we will use further on in the season to work on our project. But now we're back to full-on helm build, and it's okay that Jeff is not here because today is our pattern day. The helmets that we had out here before actually came from a pattern from another cosplayer, a commercially produced pattern. And since they fit Jeff so well, he's actually going to use that pattern for his helmet. And that pattern comes to us from Camu Cosplay. And in fact, that particular one, they have lots of patterns available on their site. We downloaded one to use for some different horns for what he wants to use on his helm. But that particular helmet pattern is free. And there's some really good tutorials on how to use that particular pattern. Of course, you'll see Jeff putting it together here later. So really all he has to do is print out that pattern again and cut it out. Or use the pieces that I had cut out from when I made those helmets. Mine is going to be a little different because I sketched out something that's going to be completely different for an available pattern. And so today, with our longer show, I'm going to show you some different ways of making the pattern a 3D pattern for a 3D thing and then laying it out 2D so that it will be ready for foam.
I will not be helping.
It takes a little bit of doing. But first, we have to make a tool. And this is, normally you would purchase said tool, but I've got poster board and I've got a paper clip, and we're going to make a set of calipers. And calipers are a tool that you use to accurately measure something across. Like, okay. If my head was flat, I could hold up a ruler and see how far across my head is. But my head's not flat. So I have to use another tool that can kind of measure it and lay down flat on the, it'll make more sense in just a moment.
I just use like a string.
But the string is gonna, you're still looking across. See, if you had it, like we've got a camera.
Yeah.
And so if you had a camera or a mirror, you could kind of do it to a point, but you'll see how this works in just a moment. So I've got a little bit of poster board here. And what I'm going to do is just sketch out just a small caliper shape. Just kind of an arch here. And in the middle, it's kind of a larger shape. So it's like a claw tooth thing. Stop it. There. Totally squared off. Are you better now, 12-year-old Robyn?
I'm fine.
Now, look, this whole squared off because Robyn can't contain herself shape.
I'm fine.
Oh, you are not. You got issues over there. All right. There we go. So we've got a thing. We're going to make another one of these. The same size. And so I'm just flipping it over. Sketching out my totally innocent squared off shape thing. I'm going to hear about this later, aren't I?
Maybe.
All right. And I'm going to cut this one out. The sides don't really have to be totally exactly the same. Unless, you know, you're a perfectionist. At which point, what I'm doing is probably killing you. Cut it out a little bit. Get all the parts. Alright. So here's how we use this. And part of the reason that I want this is I've got my sketch of my helm that should be an accurate size or kind of a rough size of what I want. I want to make this, and I want to make a 3D version, so I have to make a cutout of it. And in order to get it right, I have to make sure that I'm doing it at the right size. So I take my two pieces to either end here, and right in the middle here, this is where I want my eyes, so I want the sides of my head to fit. So I take my calipers. Where's the camera? There we go. So I've got them together, and I can measure out exactly where the sides of my head are at this point. And now when I lay it down, that is how big my head is. Out of poster board.
Cool.
Actual calipers are pricey.
Yeah.
I can't do actual calipers. All right. So, and I wanted this. I'm going to make it about similar. Put a little mark there on the two sides. And there's my center point, roughly center between these two things. I can actually measure it out and make sure of that. It's at 6.5 inches. So 3 1/4. Ah, look at that. Bam! I am good. I'm good, everybody.
Good job.
All right. So that's where I wanted it to be. And my lowest point here was at, let's see, 6.5 inches down from there. Looked good. I can also double check that figure with my handy caliper. So that was right about the eye to where I want it to hit on the lower. Hey, camera, look at me. I'm talking in the Pac-Man. So about where I want it to hit down in front. Lay that down. It's going to be just a little longer than what I had going on. And then from that point, the top of it, I just had roughly drawn out. And I like the proportions that I had going on. So I can use my caliper there to say from the center point to an upper point here. Now that I have those points, there's one thing that I need to there's one piece that I need additional to that, is that I need to make it just a little bit wider because I've got thick foam. So 10 millimeter foam.
What is that, like quarter of an inch?
About 1/4 of an inch. So each side, that is very good. That is very good. So I'm going to throw each of these out an extra 10 millimeters. So that I have the right size. Now, at this point, I'm going to give it a bit of an arch here. Now, it's okay if this is not completely symmetrical. I'm going to say that, and there are people out there I know that are going to be, what are you talking about? You're making a helm, it's got to be symmetrical. But what I'm making is the basis to build off of, and so it doesn't have to be exactly symmetrical because I'm only going to make 1/2 of the helm as a pattern.
Okay, yeah, like what's
So I can use the same pattern on both sides. All right, so this is going to be from the front. I'm going to cut this out real quick, and I'm going to do the same thing for a side view of the helmet. There we go. So, this is half of what we're going to be playing with today. Got enough space there? Yeah, I've got enough space on the other end of this. Poster board's cheap, but I might as well make use of it where I can. No, I'm still good with this one.
Good, because you're not getting this one.
Now, what I didn't sketch out is I didn't sketch out the side of the helmet. I just sketched out from the front. And that's okay. The side's going to be kind of the same thing, but I have to figure out the point at the top. Do I want it in the middle or slightly forward, slightly back? And I'm actually going to do it slightly back. And since my head is not exactly spherical, more of an oblong shape, again, I'm going to mark out from where I did on my points on my eyes, but I'm going to mark out the front back with my handy calipers. All right. And that we'll put about there. So it's making sure I have enough room for everything. So there's one side, there's another. Ruler it up, 7.5. So 4. There's our center point. And for there, the same length is fine. The same top is fine. But the top here, rather than being exactly the same, I want since this is the side view, I can choose where I want to put this top. And I'm actually going to move it slightly over here.
So moving it over one direction versus the other, how does that change where the point goes on the head?
So by moving it, so if I had it centered, that would be straight up in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
By moving it one direction, then I get to decide if that point is now forward or now backward. In this case, I'm going to do a slight back sweep. It'll make a whole lot more sense here in just a moment when we have it in a 3D shape and we're starting to sketch it out. And we can kind of see what it looks like before we ever have a pattern of it. So stick with me here a minute.
I'll try.
She'll try. All right, so I've got this same arch going here. But it's a little bit different on what will be the front. All right, so this I'm going to label side. I'm going to give it a quick cut out. The nice thing in patterning like this is that you can really get a feel for what the final product is going to look like on the cheap before you ever cut into the nice foam. All right, so we're going to move some of this poster board out of the way. Now, we're going to put these together, and in order to do that, let's see how long total we have. 18 inches, so 9. So we'll cut a slit straight down about 9 inches there. From the point, the highest point that we want, which would be the tip. And then on the other side, still lining up with the highest point, we'll cut from 9 inches the other direction. Now, at which point, we can now put these two together like IKEA furniture.
It's magic.
in a rough shape. Oh, one side or another didn't quite get long enough.
Never mind, it's not like magic.
It's still magic. There. So, now I know this is going to be a really tall helm. But that's what I'm after. So there's eyes. It's going to be crazy tall. So I have to even bend down to be able to see it on the camera. I do want this to be a little steadier for what we're doing. So I'm going to get a little bit of duct tape here. Now all I'm going to do is secure the sides a little bit. I don't need to go crazy with it. Flip the reverse end, do the same thing. Just add a couple pieces of tape, top and bottom. Flip. How's that tree coming, Robyn?
It's going
Oh,
great.
that is a good tree.
See, my art teacher only taught me how to draw one thing in kindergarten, and it's a tree.
Yeah. Did you learn foliage?
No, I only learned the tree.
Only
Just
dead
the
winter
tree.
trees.
Basically, I don't know if you're interested, but you start out with this shape. You just outline it here, and then you just, in the center, break off into branches, and just continuously continue breaking off. And the idea is you never actually finish a branch, you just go off the page.
So your art teacher never finished a tree. Maybe there is foliage somewhere out there.
I
but
just don't know.
So your tree is infinitely large.
So I
But
always
we'll never
just
know.
put little stars, and that's where fairies are. The only other thing I know how to draw
We
is
can't
an
kill
anime
foliage,
eye.
but we got fairies.
Fairies.
Fairyage. And what I'm going to do here is just give it a little more stability for the next piece of what we're doing. And I'm going to add in a couple of pieces. And this I'm just kind of sketching so that it looks right. I'm just kind of following the same curve down. That's a terrible drawing. Alright. Add a little duct tape to it and get it stuck in there. And what this is doing is giving me a little more to build off of as we build up our pattern here in just a minute. So, Robyn, you've been on the show before.
Yeah, I was
You
dressed
happen
like
to be-
Padme Amidala.
Dressed up like Padme. What all kinds of cosplaying have you done aside from just wandering around as Padme?
I do mostly a lot of closet cosplay, which is the concept of just taking what's normally in your closet to resemble a character.
Yeah.
That's really how I started. We started going to see the X-Men movies, and then I was like, I want to dress up like Rogue for the X-Men movies. Well, I have black pants and opera gloves, so we did that. Which is honestly one of the main reasons I had red hair in high school, was so I could cosplay Rogue.
Oh, right on.
And then I've always kind of been crafty, so I started doing crafts and mostly jewelry. I think my biggest and my best craft project is the Mary Sue Championship belt.
Right on.
Made it all myself.
That's mint
8
green.
hours. It is mint green and gray.
Mint green and gray are the colors. If you are looking to win over Robyn, make
Yes.
everything mint green and gray.
Basically, we started with one of the kids' toy wrestling belts.
Yeah.
I built up walls with clay on each of the faceplates, and I used quick set 10-minute resin. I poured it on in different layers, so we got like one continuous like pour
Yeah.
over every piece, and like since of course it's a round object, you can't just pour resin and be like, oh, it's all covered. You have to do it in layers.
Right.
So I had like multiple layers, and they spent 4 hours sanding it down.
Yeah. The sanding part. All right. So it's time for some foil. And what we're going to do, this side of the helm is where I'm going to build the pattern. I'm not too worried about this other side, but I am going to use it to kind of hold some of the foil. And so I just grabbed a couple of pieces of duct tape here to be able to start this sucker off. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap foil. Come on, foil. Work with me. Around this shape. I don't care if the foil is if it's looking very good or anything like that. Thank you much. I kind of build it up. A little bit more. Yeah, I will need another piece. That, give me one more long piece. We'll wrap it kind of around the whole side again.
Do you need another piece of duct tape?
Nope. Foil is going to work for us. All right. We'll use some. I know, it's really confusing now. It's like Christmas. And we wrapped it in foil instead of some sort of. You need one more piece. Instead of one more piece of duct tape. Now, what I really want to do is I want to make my pattern out of duct tape. But
that makes
duct
sense.
tape sticks to the paper and then we wouldn't be able to peel it off. So I've got to give the duct tape something to stick to, hence the foil.
I've seen this method before on Barbie dolls.
Yeah, and so this is the half of the helm that we're going to get, and I'm going to tape just a little longer than half so that I go past the center line. And I'm just going to layer a layer of duct tape all the way down. Longer.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Cool. And I said I wasn't going to help.
You got suckered in.
Damn it.
Now, were we building with anything other than foam, I would probably, before adding duct tape, want to give this more structure by stuffing it with some aluminum foil and getting it a little more the general shape that we want. But the nice thing is that the foam will poof out and kind of fill itself as long as we get it cut right. All right. There we go. These are getting longer and longer.
You said longer.
I did say longer than what we had. We don't necessarily have to go quite that long anymore, especially getting towards the top.
Happy?
I am ecstatic. So this duct tape is going to be not longer than that. I mean, like, Look, if you get frustrated with me, go over there and beat on Jeff. Take it out on him. There we go. Like 3 or 4 more pieces, and we should be in a good spot. Thank you very much. Let's pause with that. Alright. Shove my hand inside here. Nice and kind of smoothed out. So, now we have one foil crazy side. Hey, camera. Hi, camera over here. Show me the side. We have one foil kind of crazy side over here. This side we don't care about. We've got one good taped side, and this is showing us the outline of where we're going. And we can see the helm, the tip is pointed towards the back where we want it, and all of that. So the next step is to take this and my picture and probably our spiffy calipers and sketch out this half of the helm, the whole thing. I'm going to start by giving it a bit of a center line here. I know where the center is because it's where that piece of poster board goes through. This is still kind of a rough pattern, but it will be good. Now, I know that I had the eyes were at 6.5. Oh, I'll just remeasure. All right, so remeasuring this head side to side, right in there. So that's about where I want my eyes to be. So going off of my drawing here, I'm starting with where I want to be able to see, because vision is important. Even dead without a stone in his head. See, it's a Marvel joke. I just slipped that on in there. If you haven't seen enough Marvel movies to know who Vision is and that he's dead.
Oh, you said Vision. I didn't hear that.
That's all right. You're living under a rock, but you've had quite enough time to see it by now.
I mean, it's been a year.
It has. It's still too fresh. Poor Vision. He was one of my favorites. All right. So I've got that, and I also want to sweep the back up just a little bit. Now, on a helm, when you look up, part of your head, your cadets, you've got neck back there. If you want to be able to move your head in a helm where the foam is static and goes all the way down, you got to get a little bit of a sweep going, because otherwise you will be stuck like Michael Keaton Batman. I would look at you, Joker, but I have to turn my whole body around. It's terrible. All right. Now, the other thing that I want is I sketched out a bit of trim in here. And so even though that's going to end up being decorative, maybe by paint decorative, I still want to sketch it out where I want it. But actually, in thinking about this and being elvish, I think I'm going to get a little fancier here.
It's like adding your seam allowance. Or at least it looks like that.
It looks like adding seam allowance, yeah? On a curve, so here's, let's see. I should match that curve.
Or else they're going to like stab themselves in the neck with the edge of their helmet.
Well, no, but I want to match the curve of my trim. I'm trying to go a little more curvy. This is going to be an elf thing. Mm-hmm. And so elves and armor, you just
They're
don't
more
have
fluid.
hard points. Yeah. And let's see. Do I want that to sweep? You know what? I think I want that to not sweep as much there. I'll take the trim across. But another reason to add all this trim on is after I cut out these and make my pattern pieces, I can also further out make the trim pieces. There we go. That little tip on the eye looks a lot more elf. And now I'm going to mark out kind of where I want my little crown of leaves and vines. I'm not going to do all of those as far as the pattern's concerned because I'm going to end up doing just some vines and attach them. I just want to know where it is that I want to put them. And of course I've got this gem thing in the top up here. So I'm going to mark out roughly where I want that. Now, we've got kind of a basic pattern here. Here's the next important piece before we do anything else.
You either cut it out or you remove the foil.
There's a step before all that. We want to add some registration marks. And we're going to add more of these as we cut the pattern. But basically, it's little line marks. Let me get my center point here. Along it in certain areas. And all I'm doing is just adding some lines along the center edge, and we'll transfer this to our pattern, and we'll actually transfer these to our foam. And that way, when we have this in two parts and we're gluing the foam together, we can match up the registration marks and make sure that we're lining it up correctly. So now I have one half of a helm, and it is time to cut. And scissors would be absolutely great. Not having them, I'm just going to use my blade here. And even though it's all kind of mushed up, I'm going to go slow and careful and try and get it as
Do you need help?
centered as I can. I just got to... Sometimes the layers of foil, it sometimes snags a little bit. And I'm really not worried about the foil part. So if that tears, no big deal. There we go. All the way to the top on that side. Same sort of thing over here.
The left side of my tree doesn't have any berries.
The left side?
Yeah.
Well, which side is the sun facing? Isn't that like a thing?
I don't know. I didn't think that far in advance.
You didn't plan out that tree?
I did not plan out this tree. No, I did not.
My brother would be sad. He is a big plant person. In fact, today is his birthday. So happy birthday, Ben. There you go. Shout out from the show. Now, we have our pattern for the side of our helmet. But because it was 3D, it's not going to lay flat on our foam. So we have to do another thing to it. And some parts will kind of lay flat. But the parts that won't, we're going to have to make some cuts. And so we're going to look at kind of the center point. So right through here would be a good spot. Before we cut, we're going to mark where we cut. And we're going to add registration marks all the way across. If we wanted to...
Can I cut this one? Or do you not trust me?
Yeah, sure, you can cut it. Let's see.
He's so hesitant.
No, I'm thinking about if I want to go further than that. Actually, here's what I'm going to do. It'll be a whole lot easier on the foam in the end to go all the way down. Just adding a few more registration marks in there.
Cool.
All right.
Yes.
You might want this blade.
The nice
over that
one. Okay.
Just slow and straight line all the way down. Now, the reason really all that we have to do is cut far enough so that the pattern lays flat or flatter. And we'll probably still have to make one more cut in it. The reason I went all the way down is when it's laying out on the foam, it's going to be a lot easier to position two smaller pieces than one giant piece that's opened up. Now, the other thing we're going to do before we make any more cuts is make a mark of which piece it is. Once you start getting a helm in more than 2 or 3 pieces, you really got to mark which ones are which so that it's a lot more obvious when you're putting it all back together.
I did so good.
Woohoo! All right, so let's. So this one I'm gonna. So we got it. Lay it out. It lays out nice and flat. I'm gonna say this is the rear section. Is that one laying out pretty nice and flat?
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty good. I thought we'd have to cut a little more up here to smooth it out some. Actually, you know what? I might do that anyway. Just to... And this one won't go all the way across. This will just go this far. But that way when we lay it on the foam, I can spread it open just a little bit and get just a little bit extra room on the top of there. Like that. All right. So, the other part here is I do want to cut out where my holes are. I do not want to cut out the trim just yet. I do want to cut these parts. To heck with those parts. Alright, and across the bottom. Ditch that. Sweep. Ditch that. Now, this are still kind of a mess. Mess with lots of foil. So, now, give me another piece of poster board.
Do you want the one with my tree on it?
Nah, I don't want to cut up your tree this episode. So what I'm going to do is copy it over onto the poster board. And here is where I want to take a little bit of effort and make sure that I don't have talking and drawing at the same time. Here I want to make sure that I don't have all the extra foil and stuff. And some of these lines aren't going to be the straightest when I put them on here. That's okay, because I'm going to go back and smooth it out a little bit. I want to mark all my registration marks. And where I'm putting the trim. Alright.
Yeah, this is too big for my head.
There's where that line went across. Here's where the trim goes across. And so I do want to smooth out those lines a little bit. When you're making the duct tape part, if you add more foil and more duct tape, it's easier to have more solid pattern pieces when you get to this point. But I think we're going to be fine with what we're doing. All right, one down, one to go. Go. I'm just taking my time with this to a point. We only have so much time on the show.
Got like, what, 15 minutes left? Ish.
There we go. All my registration marks. And this is our trim. This is our gemstone area. Oh, I didn't curve out the front like I had curved on my trim. Now the trim I'm just sketching back on. Later, when I cut out the pieces, I will probably transfer that design back over to some paper and give it its own pattern. So long as I've got it roughly right where I want it there, and we're good. Now, it's also important to note, right now, it's obvious that because we've been doing this whole time and because we're following on the project, and we can always go back and look at the video, I know that this is the right side of the helm when I made it. But I'm still going to mark right side on both of the pieces so that somewhere down the way, when I'm looking to play with these patterns, whether I'm looking to use the same pattern or to manipulate it into another piece, make another helm, whatever the case is, I can keep track that this is the right side, and then when I flip it over, that would be, of course, the left side. And I lost a cap here. There we go. So now we just need to cut these out. You can see we're being nice and careful here, and that's a big reason we keep Sugared Up Jeffrey in the corner on the day we're playing with the careful knives. Later, he can cut out his patterns with safety scissors. All right. Couple of spots I didn't quite get all the way through there. You know, next week we are cutting foam, and I'm going to get a new blade for that. All right, one piece. See, you thought you were just going to draw a tree the whole time. Now you're playing with the foil.
I'm making the tiara.
Is it a tree tiara? Do the branches of the tiara just keep going infinitely off into the far reaches of this film studio?
Just gonna have to wait and see.
I probably shouldn't be giving you ideas.
No, you really shouldn't.
But that's what people say about me. All right. Cutting part. There we go. When we get to cutting foam, we want to be careful too, but since we'll already have the pattern done, it will be a far more exciting show, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Almost. Come on, sliver. There we go. That's lovely. That's lovely. All right. And so it's all flat right now, but as we start putting things together and matching up, even now as we match up where some of the points are, it becomes a 3D thing. And with the foam, it will naturally go into that shape, although we'll do a little bit of heat forming on it and stuff as well. The trim part, I can do a couple of different ways. Method number one is I can sketch over it with some tissue paper, something where I can see it, and then cut out of the tissue paper when I cut it, put it on its own foam. I can also, after cutting this pattern out of the foam, I can go ahead and cut this part and lay it out on another piece of foam in order to be able to get it cut out as well where I need to.
And if you did that, you'd have like an entire separate piece, so it'd be more like 3D, like a trim that like...
Yeah, well, the trim will be a separate piece of foam that attaches onto it. Either way, that's the plan. So the trim will be an extra piece of foam added on, and the line that I put here will be going to do some vines and leaves and maybe little flowers and things that will be sort of a
if you need any
crown.
Trees.
We're gonna do that with some sculpting foam. And so maybe you'll have to come back and do some sculpting trees.
I'll do a more in-depth lecture on this whole branching out concept.
Branching out concept. Anyway, so this is where we're at. We still got the main piece. Obviously, the patterns end up being a little bit bigger. The duct tape patterns at this point, we can just toss. We're done with, completely done with. And we are keeping the little calipers here in the old toolbox. So as we start measuring things out, we can make sure that our pieces are lining up correctly where they are. A nice set of calipers would be a real good thing if you do a lot of costuming and stuff long term, and they would hold their shape and all that sort of thing. Here, we're just gonna roughen it, and we can measure things out, and we're good so long as it's squares at the top, because some people have issues.
I went to public middle school. Come on.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I mean, come on. We're costuming here. That's not what we're costuming. The other thing that I forgot, I brought a big old envelope. And what this is, we can keep track of. I'll keep my smaller picture in it. Actually, I may just go ahead and fold this, but I can keep all of my pattern pieces together in one place. That lays flat. That lays flat. And then as my pattern pieces go in here, obviously they're a little bit big for the folder, and I could fold them. I think I'm not going to fold these yet until after I've used them next week. Then I'll just fold them in half once, and I can mark out Fatal Helm. And that way, as I've got multiple patterns around or multiple things, I can keep this somewhere, just, in a drawer, wherever it's a whole lot easier to keep track of all of your patterns. When Jeff cuts his out, we'll do the same thing for his, one for the helm, one for the horns, so that if we need any of those pieces on a future project, we could just pull that one out and reuse the patterns. Even though the commercial ones are printable, and we can always reprint them, if we've already got it made, then we might as well use what we've already got. Simple enough. And that's where we are for the day.
Cool.
So, got stuff going. So next week we are going to be cutting foam, as I mentioned. Then I think there's a little bit of a break with some other shows or stuff that Kaiju Labs are doing. What you're running stuff with Mary Sue, right?
Yes. But
what all are you doing?
A lot. I'm doing too much. So we've got the Mary Sue game, which is a fan fiction Mary Sue creation competition. If you win, you get the Mary Sue championship belt. So that's...
Yeah, there was lots of sanding involved in that.
4 hours worth of sanding.
4 hours worth of sand. Do you have a Dremel tool?
No, I rented a sander from the Home Depot place.
Oh.
One of those places.
So, a little trick, once you get some of the sanding smooth with resin, if you mix up some clear resin and brush it on over it, it's self-leveling, it fills in all the little cracks, and it's nice and smooth.
You've done that.
The things you learn after you've done it once.
It's fine. I'm the next project, it might not be this week or next week, but we're updating the belt.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What are you putting on it?
Well, I'm starting all over from scratch.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Because the belt originally was for our podcast, for Cannon Fodder. We did Mary Sue. So it still just says Cannon Fodder Mary Sue Champion.
I see.
And now that we are officially our own show, it deserves its own brand. So.
Are you going to do the similar thing with the resin and all of that?
Yeah, we're going to... I got some resin dye, so we're going to make it gold.
Okay.
So resin will already be gold, so we don't have to paint. Well, it's going to get painted, but it starts out a base color.
Sure.
And then we're going to... Haven't decided yet if we're going to use foam to do the design.
Okay.
Or dry on clay, or if we're just going to paint it again.
So, how fast are you doing this?
It's probably just going to take me an afternoon.
Well, I mean, so I've got some... One really neat thing that I've got for different prop making is some stuff called monster clay.
Okay.
It's clay. When you warm it up just with a heat gun, it becomes very soft to the point if you wanted it to be liquid and pour into molds, you could do that just with a heat gun. And then when at room temperature, it's solid so that you can then sculpt and do all sorts of things, and then you can make a mold off of that.
I might be coming to your house.
It's time to pull out the monster clay. I played with some different clays and some different stuff. making molds for a while, and I finally got around to spend. Monster clay is pretty cheap, but I finally got around to getting some monster clay. Oh man, it is night and day when you go for the good stuff.
Yeah, might definitely be coming over to your place to use that.
We might have to do a show playing with some monster clay if we can keep Jeff to a minimum. But that is the show today. I know it kind of went on, and there were points that I was nice and quiet. Sorry about that. Gotta focus on what I'm doing. But I thought it was important in patterning to be sure that you can use this technique and see the entire technique instead of kind of rushing it through in a half an hour, to really be sure and get the project that you're working on to the state that you want to do. And if I put this together and realize I don't like it, I just make more poster board and get going again. So thanks for tuning in. Watch some more of us. Watch some more of Kaiju Media. We are all over the place doing all sorts of cool stuff. And continue crafting.